Hi, everybody. This is Jake, and I'm just coming to you today. I got a one-on-one interview with the one and only Michael Macintosh, and we got to touch base with him a little bit earlier this week, and we'd love to hear more of his story. And so we got him here today. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Can't complain. Really excited to get to talk to you today. Um, we touched on a few things last time we were talking, but we didn't really get to hear the whole aspect of your involvement with MJ12. Just to get a little catch up going. I remember you were in the room in the hotel room with some gray aliens that were talking to you either telepathically or verbally. Um,
It was
and
yeah, it was totally silent. There was no telepathic communication. It was one-to-one thought and emotional communication, no verbal utterance whatsoever.
okay,
So yeah, that's how they communicate. And it was late at night, and they just I was just lying there doing nothing, and they just appeared to me. And next thing you know, I was gone with them.
and then you said, where did you go after that? Is that when you piloted the craft?
Yeah, they basically they can sort of like tractor beam you out of your location to a craft. Like the craft have tractor beam type. Um, I don't know what they are. I mean, the technology basically, and to sum it up, that can take you out of your where you are and bring you into that craft.
Is that like the light spectrum that people seem to get like raised up out of their beds with that
That must,
you
yeah,
in sci-fi and
that's it. Yeah, it's basically identical to what is described in science fiction,
okay.
except it's real. Obviously that's just part of disclosing it to people, is putting it in science fiction for people to grasp the concept. But it is an actual real process.
Yeah, sort of like a soft disclosure, just to kind of introduce people to it.
Yeah, I guess that's what it would be. That's why that's being done.
And so, when you piloted that craft, was that the same craft that crashed, or was it a different craft?
It was the Roswell craft. It
Okay.
was. It took me from my hotel room in 2019. I was visiting a city in Europe, and took me from there and took me. Well, they took me into it and allowed me to pilot it, and I from there motioned it. I quickly figured out how to actually fly it, because it's basically sort of an auto response to your. It seems biometrically guided and navigated, so it somehow it was either became attuned to my process, or it was automatically tuned for me, or I don't know how they did that, but that's how it was. And I knew that, oh wait, this is just somehow I knew, like, whether it was a telepathic communication that was given to me, just somehow I knew that it was the Roswell craft and what I had to do with it. Because, sorry, just let me turn off this volume here. But just prior to that, I had been talking pretty seriously about disclosure and how important that was with certain other people who are fairly proactive in the disclosure movement. And so I realized that what I had to do with the craft was simply to crash it, to travel it back to the 1940s and to crash it. And so that from that point, the concept of its existence would be put into the minds of the people in that time period, and thus from that point onward, to
So
help
you don't,
in.
so you don't know if anything was given to you about crashing the craft, or you don't know if it was something that you just knew was the right thing to do, and in order to fill that
Yeah,
timeline.
Basically, it was just something that I knew. I mean, I suppose it could have been given to me. It's an interesting, there's an interesting thing when you communicate with these beings. It's that it's almost as though there's a collective con- conscience or consciousness, where everybody's thoughts is everybody else's thoughts. So it's kind of hard to separate out which is yours and which is other people's. It's sort of just there all at once. And so I don't know if that originated with me, but it was there nonetheless. So, and I knew that it was the right thing to do, whether it was my decision or sort of a group decision. Either way, I, being the pilot, knew that it was the right thing to do. And especially considering that just prior to that, I had been talking about how necessary it was for disclosure to come into existence somehow, because it's ultimately really important that people know these things are real. And it just seemed the logical right thing to do. It wasn't that premeditated at all. It was just, it was an instinctive, almost basically an instinctive thing to do, except on a level of it being sort of a collective consciousness decision.
Okay.
But that everybody, but that it was also unanimous. So it was, it's just a strange way to experience things, and it's difficult to communicate it effectively. I suppose the best thing that anybody could do would be to go through it, and then they'd fully understand. But I'm doing my best to explain how that works.
Okay, and then so after the crash, you said that one body was deceased.
Yeah.
There was one living, and then
Yeah.
and then there was also yourself.
Yeah, there were three beings in it. Just let me add that the thing about one of the beings dying is that it actually doesn't really matter, because those beings have a way, they have a technological way to actually resuscitate that person into another body. So it's kind of like, if they die, they don't really die. They can just take their consciousness and sort of insert it into another body, which they can create them. They clone themselves. It's like, so they basically live forever, or at least as long as they want to. So the body may have died. Sorry.
I was going to say that's interesting, because that
Yeah.
seems to be public knowledge of what Greys are. They seem to be a clone race or maybe a worker race. And
Yeah.
if bodies are so expendable, I could see people having that interpretation of,
Yeah.
oh, this is just a robot or something working for somebody else, just because it's hard to understand a civilization that has gotten to a point where it can just build itself a new vessel to carry
Yeah.
through.
Well, it does, but it's also not beyond the realm of possibility for even for us with our limited capacity and technological abilities, because I mean, I do think that, it's definitely, there's definite evidence that could happen with us even in the future. So it seems like at some point in the future we may be able to do that too, but we never have to. People in the future may never have to die. They may just continue to create new bodies and occupy those somehow from their prior ones. But that may even happen right now. I don't know. It could be possible and be happening right now. It's just not public knowledge, and I don't have any awareness of that fact.
So what got you from the point where you requested to go have a meeting with the president after that crash, and then got you back to that place in Europe where
Yeah, there were, well, it being a really kind of unusual looking craft, somehow the military were alerted to its presence, and before long there were military swarming it. They're all around it. There was a lot of military presence. And because I was the human, they didn't know what to make of the other living being or dead being, as far as I could tell. They approached me and started to question me. There was all military personnel, and at first they just wanted to know if I was German, because at that point we were, Germany had declared war against the United States, so they suspected that I may be a a pilot of some sort of top secret advanced German hostile craft to the United States. They had no idea what it was. And I just told them, no, I'm not German. I'm American, but I'm from the future. And they couldn't. They didn't. None of them really could accept that or believe it. And then they couldn't really sort of get their thinking around it adequately enough for me to explain it to them. And rather than waste time, I just sort of insisted that I needed to speak to the president, and it was important because I knew that if anyone was going to understand, or at least be able to talk to people who could explain it to them, it would be the president himself. And so there was one military guy that I was speaking with. I didn't get any of their names, but he said, that doesn't, you don't really get to talk to the president, but considering the circumstances, I think we can make that happen. So they put me in like a van. It was well, like a truck, or really a military truck. And they drove me from there all the way to Washington, D.C. through back roads, because they didn't have highways back then. And it took a couple of weeks actually to get from New Mexico, the desert near Roswell. It wasn't actually in Roswell, as far as I'm aware, to Washington.
I wanted to ask, you think from the crash itself? Well, first of all, did the crash itself? Did you get knocked out from it? Did you have to come to afterwards, or were you relatively?
Yeah, I was relatively fine. I mean, I've been in car accidents and stuff, so I sort of know how to brace for an impact if there is an impact. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Boston, so it's like, as we call it in Boston, is traffic anarchy. So you kind of get knocked about just from driving on the roads in Boston and on the highways. I've been in a bunch of car accidents, so it's kind of like not really a big deal to me. But,
Okay, and so going with that question, and because there seems to be a lot of speculation on what happened to the craft after the Roswell crash,
yeah.
would you say, as the pilot, that craft was probably totaled and was not drivable after that point, or do you think it was in a state where it could be repaired?
Well, from that point, I honestly don't know what they did with it, and that's probably a good thing, because if I knew, then I would be able to give that information possibly to the wrong hands, even at this point. And so I'm being honest in saying that I actually do not know what they did with it. It was probably,
just as the pilot, do you think the vehicle was totaled in your eyes, of like, okay, I'm not going to be able to back this thing out and fly it again. We're definitely crashed here.
yeah, it didn't seem really badly damaged. It seems like it just needed maybe a minor repair or set of repairs. But
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because that would fit more of the idea of why the U.S. government would bring it back more than and it would explain maybe some of our reverse technology efforts. It's like, almost, if you have this dead hunk of metal, then at what point do you say, okay, well, we can't do much with it besides scrap it for parts, and maybe we can get something out of the craft itself.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they still have it somewhere. I mean, another reason that I crashed it. I mean, I'm like, as I'm flying it, I'm thinking, I was in Europe at the time as I'm flying, and I think, well, no, this has to go to America because the American military and government are the best custodians of this kind of technology, even now. And so that's another reason why I deliberately crashed it into the United States in a remote area. So I would say that probably the military still have that craft somewhere, warehoused somewhere, hidden away from anyone who could cause danger because of possessing it. And that would be obviously catastrophic if that were to happen. It's a very powerful piece of technology. So hopefully that they continue to keep it protected until such a time that it's safe to make it available to anybody.
So
Really.
you finish your couple-day trip. You get to DC. Then what takes place?
It was probably close to 3 weeks actually that it took to get there. It was a long journey. But I got to DC and very quickly I was at the Oval Office with Harry Truman. And I'm not sure exactly what the date was, but that I was there, but he had only recently become the president because he was the vice president and the president died. FDR died. So Truman didn't really expect to be the president much longer. He wasn't anticipating being reelected. So basically we didn't beat around the bush. We just I got to the point and I said, Mr. President, basically, I'm trying to remember exactly what I told him. Basically, I told him that I was a time traveler from the future, and he's like, "Really?" Like he wasn't that shocked by that fact. Honestly, he was excited and happy to hear that, but he wasn't that shocked by it. But I guess in order to verify that I was telling the truth, he asked me, if you're a time traveler, how do we end this war? So I basically explained to him what I had learned in history class as a kid, that the U.S. military, basically I said, you invade Europe through Normandy, and that's how you defeat Germany, and then you drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to defeat Japan. And he didn't even know what an atomic bomb was. Actually, he had to go and ask somebody. He's like, do we have this thing called an atomic bomb? And they told him, and said, yeah, Mr. President, it's like we have these weapons. He's like, really? So that kind of verified to him that I was telling the truth about this. So from that point onward, he seemed to really like me and believe what I was saying, which was, nice. So he kind of kept me around.
Were you there for multiple days, or was it a matter of hours all in one day, or what do you think?
Well, the whole thing started in 1945. I was there until 1947.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I lived and I worked in the Truman administration for 2 years, even though I was born in 1974.
So they didn't bring you back to Europe right away?
No.
Okay.
They didn't want to bring me anywhere right away. They brought me, they kept me around Washington, D.C. They brought me around as sort of like part of the president's entourage, even like maybe as like a kitchen cabinet member, like a cabinet, a closet cabinet member. But and so I helped him do that, like take care of ending the war, and which helped him get reelected. was not expecting that. It helped secure his reelection, that he was ending the war. And what else? And from that point, that the war was really kind of over.
Did you do anything significant while you were there for those 2 years?
Just sort of acted as encouragement and advisor, really. And they kind of wanted to make sure that I was telling the truth. So I think that's another reason why they wanted to keep me around. And they certainly would have realized that by the time that it was time to send me back. So I guess that's another big part of aiding in the disclosure movement, is that, helping people to realize that time travel itself is also a reality, and that our government has been in contact with people from future points in time who have helped them make important decisions. So maybe that will happen. Maybe that will continue to happen. I don't really know, but I haven't been in the government.
And so what led to this 2-year trip ending? What did somebody come and pick you up? Was it our technology that got you back? Or was it something else?
Yeah, what happened was, an important thing was that Truman put together an executive order to kind of lend support to this movement that I was talking about, that needed to take place in the future, and needed to be this mission basically that needed to be accomplished in the future, which was the disclosure movement needed to be completed, and how important that would be for not just America, but humanity as a whole. And so he agreed to give support to the Majestic 12 movement, as it was called, which it was basically nicknamed after me, Michael James, and 12 individuals who were not really selected by me, but were recommended as people who would be trustworthy in making this mission happen. They were mostly like military people, successful business people, and prominent Americans of the time. And they were all selected as the 12 key members who would keep this movement going until they were eventually replaced by other people after they died. And so and there were some other small political things that the U.S. was in a position to, at the time, make happen, that I requested that they seriously consider, and were made happen. Like, well, just I guess maybe I shouldn't talk too much about that, but sort of political movements that have happened since 1947 around the world, that have sort of ushered in more freedoms for people in general in other parts of the world, which we'll see are important to the present and indeed the future as well. I think, I hope anyway. And after that point, they basically, we all realized it was time for me to go back to my natural timeline, my natural point in time. So they brought the craft, wherever it had been, to Washington, D.C., wherever they had housed it. And one of the gray that was the alien that survived was with the craft, and him and one of the Majestic 12 members, who I later found was actually sort of a relative of mine, which I didn't realize. He was married to my dad's great aunt, a man named Roscoe Hillencoter. who was also one of the founders of the Central Intelligence Agency, like one of the key founders of the CIA.
So was
Flew.
he also related to Howard Hughes?
No, he was related through marriage, not through blood.
Okay.
So he was a married relative, not an actual blood relative. Um, I'm I'm a blood relative of his wife and additionally Howard Hughes. His wife's maiden name was Clark, which is a branch of my family. The same Lewis and Clark, you're familiar with them?
That's from the same family lineage?
Yeah, it's the same family.
Wow.
Yeah, there's an old British and Irish American family that helped found the colonies and subsequently the United States. So I'm descended from that, among other things. But they agreed, and we all agreed that it was time for me to go from that point after the war had been over and things had kind of settled down, that the economy was starting to come back and America was coming back, and that it was time for me to go home, basically. So they put me in the craft. I got in with them, and we took it back to the very same hotel that I had been taken out of. And it was basically as though I had never left. It was right in the same moment that I had left. So
they rounded back.
I'm sorry.
So
what was that?
Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard me. So did that complete the circle and like round it back, or was that they brought you back before that point and then you continued on to that, or how do you think it just canceled out that original meeting and it was the same timing?
And what I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean, honestly.
Because it seems like the first time they picked you up, which was in, you said 2019, correct?
Yeah, it was late 2019. I have
the
date.
Sorry, go ahead. I couldn't hear you.
I have the exact date written down in a notebook somewhere. I'll dig it up for you at some point if you'd like.
Oh, okay.
I have a journal of these types of experiences because my memory is not, I'm not too keen on actually remembering, like sticking in a state of memory all the time of these things. I'd rather just jot it down and move forward. That's how I am. But I do jot it down.
Well, we were talking the other day about the significance of that date. Did you ever remember what the significance of that date was?
Yeah, I do remember. It was 9/24/1947. And it's just simply a reminder to me, actually, because it's a numerological thing. If you add 9 to 4, what number do you get?
9, 2, and 4?
Just if you add 9 to 4.
Oh, 13?
Correct. And there were 13 original states of the United States.
Okay.
And 1947 is really simple because I am half Irish. My mom is from Dublin, so I'm a citizen of the United States and Ireland. And 1947 was the year, I believe, in which Ireland obtained its constitution as an independent country from the United Kingdom, which it had been governed by for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So it's basically just that for me. It's a very simple reminder of what needs to happen still, which has not yet fully happened in parts of the world that are important to me, like America and Ireland. It's a very personal thing. That's all it is, really. So.
Okay. And so let's jump on to some of your other experiences because I feel you have so many. we talked a little bit about the idea that you would be president. You're pretty convinced that you're going to be president here in the future. What gave you that initial idea? Was it something from your experiences, or was it somebody told you that, or how did that come about?
Yeah. Well, there was an experience that I had again involving time travel when I was just a little boy. I was 5 years old, and at that point, I was my dad was sort of bringing our family around because he was ex-military, and he a lot of his at that point he was ex-military, but a lot of his work was still affiliated with military. So he was basically a military contractor. He was and he still is an electrical engineer. He's still alive, thankfully. And he's still working at that, frankly. But so at that point, we were living and working in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And one weekend we were camping to kind of to check out the Rocky Mountains, just north of Calgary. And well, I encountered something that it would take me a long time to talk about, but shortly after that, I was visited by the same species of aliens, gray aliens, which came to my bedroom and took me out in the same way that I was taken out to fly the Roswell craft, which was the sort of tractor beamed me out of my bed into the craft, and they took me on a time travel journey, in which I had arrived at the year. It was around 2082 or 3 or something, and I had the realization that I needed to look to at that point that I need to look back at the history record of that point, which is all on computer, by the way. Everything's digital at that, even more digital at that point than it is now. But somehow I knew how to use it. And so I looked back at the history record, and I was able to ascertain who had become the president of the United States up to that point, up until about 2082. And so I think because of that, I know who all of the presidents will be up until about the 2080s. And I'm pretty sure that I saw that I, in fact, was in there, that somehow I had become president, which to me is really strange because, especially considering the right now, at least the way it has been, the polarization of the political world, I'm not really part of that. I'm very much outside of that completely, almost, pretty much, actually. So it seems really strange that would happen to me, especially as soon as I expect it to happen, which is by 2024. But of course, it is entirely possible that this is something that could change, and indeed it hasn't happened yet. So it's possible that anything could happen up to that point. But yeah, I was able to ascertain that. I was also able to ascertain who some of the other presidents will be.
Are there any?
Well, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably the most interesting one to me, frankly, but I think he's an interesting guy. I did figure out that he will probably be the president in 2040.
Okay.
And another one that kind of is interesting to me is Alex Jones. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
yes.
Yeah.
I'm a very I don't know, informed person about AJ, as we
Yeah,
like to call him on YouTube, just
yeah,
because we don't want to bring too much attention to ourselves saying that name.
that's
But
true. Yeah, Mr. Jones, shall we say? Um, those are both one-term presidents, as far as I can tell, and there's some others that I think are really interesting. There's a couple of, actually, three women presidents that I could figure out, which has never happened. Um, one of them is going to be a young Black woman who is a descendant of Martin Luther King. Apparently, the law changes on the eligibility for president in the 2020s, where younger people will be allowed to hold office in that regard. So I guess I'm the guy to make.
and apparently foreign citizen if Arnold Schwarzenegger makes it in by 2040.
Well, he's an American, so he's actually eligible, but
Oh, I thought
constitute.
you had to be American born. I didn't know how that worked.
Um, Not really. I mean, I I am a I am a constitutionally educated lawyer, and I can say that is a popular misconception, but the truth of it is that you don't actually have to be born a US citizen or even in the United States to be president of the United States. The clause that explains that is pretty specific, but the problem with it is that most people these days don't really understand it because it's a couple of hundred years old, and a lot of people today still have difficulty understanding the English of the 1700s because it's not their language, you know. um, it's sort of, especially in the 20th century, we had massive amounts of immigration from countries that weren't English speaking, that still aren't English speaking. So we have sort of a misconception that America is sort of like the Roman Empire, which it isn't. It was, the laws of the United States were based on British common law, which has another set of meaning. It has a different set of meaning in the European context than, say, German law, which we have a lot of German Americans, or Italian law, which is the Roman Empire. Um, it's based on a different set of understandings, and people tend to not really get that. But the truth is that, yeah, in fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger even now is eligible to become president. The problem is even he just doesn't know that because English is not his first language. Um, but yeah, he could be legally.
Me and you had previously talked about one of your former colleagues, Andrew Basciago, who you've talked to before. Would
Yeah,
you you might have seen him in a vice president or presidential role?
both. I believe that he will be president in 2028. Or excuse me, no, let me correct myself there. Vice president in 2028, and that he will do that for 4 years, and that he will also be president for 8 years in 2032.
So that would mean he gets his vision back if that timeline is to play out.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know Andy that well. You know, I haven't talked to him an awful lot, but I don't
Did
know
you
what
guys
will
talk
happen.
when you were younger, or have you guys talked since you've been able to recall some of these experiences?
Um, it was actually, well, when I started recalling these experiences, it was because I had been injured, and then I came to help me figure out why this trauma wasn't going away. Um, I started to deep dive into the research of people like Michael Ralph and Stephanie Ralph, his wife, who is a professional, like a mental health professional, which is interesting. And she wrote a lot of work on the subject of Wernicke's commands and trauma-based mind control and sort of breaking free from that. And somehow, because of Michael Relf and Stephanie Relf's research, I encountered the writing of Andy Bashago. And then rather than actually read it all, I just contacted Andy and talked to him, because his writing is pretty extensive. It's difficult to read all of it. So I just contacted Andy on social media, and we talked for a while. And he actually also helped me realize certain things too about what I had experienced, although he didn't talk about the fact that I had been part of anything. He just helped me to remember my own experiences, and told me about things that he had been through that helped him to remember things, things that he had done to help him remember things. And so it helped me to realize that I wasn't crazy for having these memories. I was actually remembering things that I had just blocked out for many years at this point. So I'm thankful to him for that, frankly. I mean, I'd probably still be depressed and have a foggy memory if not for talking with Andy for that long. So, but yeah, he never mentioned specifically or not whether he knew that I had been part of anything. In fact, we had gone on the air later, and he had sort of tried to discredit me as being crazy. So now, while I don't disagree with the fact that I may be crazy, let's be honest, I think we're all a little crazy, frankly, but I don't think I'm telling anything other than the truth. So that's a different subject. As far as I can see, I am telling the truth. As far as I can tell, I am telling the truth, and I'm doing so to the best of my ability. But yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of contact with Andy in the last couple of years, if any. This was a few years ago that we were talking a bit more regularly, and I haven't heard from him since. So.
Yeah, the last time I was able to talk to Andy Bashago personally, just through myself, was online through his social media back when his vision hadn't gone as bad as it has now. I know he doesn't run most of his social medias anymore. He has a lot of people helping him out, but he does do a weekly call-in show now. I believe he's contracted to this weekly call-in show, and that's why he's not doing any other appearances. With a gentleman named Aaron Morietti, who you met the other day. Me and you were in a private chat, and
Yeah.
Aaron popped in and had a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I really think if you've gotten that much benefit from him, it would be good. He does a regular Sunday show, and I think it would be interesting to have you call in and just say hi. I mean, maybe if it starts going a negative route, just say, you know what, Andy, I'm not here to fight or argue, but I just wanted to thank you for what you've helped me with, and those little things, because I really do think you have learned more just from your being able to work with him and remember those things.
Yeah, I'd say that's certainly true, and I hope the same is also true because of my input to this whole subject, that it has helped others. I mean, that's ultimately, I think for me to even talk about it, it has to do with my sort of desire to help people in general, more than even just myself. I'm fine. I mean, really, if I look at it in the bigger picture, there's nothing really wrong with me. It's just I might have a little bit of memory issue. I'm healthy. I'm physically healthy. I'm mentally, relatively okay. And my injuries are non-existent anymore. I work out. I eat well. I get a lot of rest. I have a lot of money. I'm good, But so it's kind of like that. I don't really need to help myself as much as I would rather help other people. And that's really why I'm talking about it, is because I know for a fact that there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there who have had similar experiences. And a lot of those people, I'm sure, are in bad situations because they can't really come to terms with it, or they may have real serious difficulty fitting in to society and functioning. I want to help those people, and I know they're out there.
Oh yeah, they might be questioning their own sanity. They might be doing a
Yeah,
lot of trying to grasp just what happened to them personally. And if they don't have a voice to be able to talk about it, I can
yeah.
see it hard for them to ever encounter somebody that would be able to help like yourself.
Hmm. And that's really why I'm doing it, because it's to me, it's, I guess it's a mix of a couple of things. I mean, I became a minister 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. So my my biggest drive there is to really just help other people. When if things are going okay for me, I view it as sort of an obligation to help other people. Um, and I guess also the fact that I come from a family of veterans. I mean, my wife, for instance, her just even talking about my wife's family. Um, her family's seen pretty serious military action. Her dad is a Vietnam veteran. Her grandfather was a fought the Japanese in the Philippines, and I know and knew these people, and I know that for people who have seen that type of violence, and been through that kind of hardship and suffering, really, um, and not really had a choice to do that. It's sort of like an obligation. And they and people from those families kind of view it as an obligation to, reach out to other people who have been through those kind of things, and make sure that they're taken care of. Because if we didn't, if as a society we sort of took the view of discarding our our military veterans and people who have been through combat, and this kind of thing, I think that makes our society less valuable somehow. These are important people, and I don't
Well, I
think
think
we're
that
doing
it makes our government less valuable because the
yeah,
government was the ones pushing these soldiers to do things that society didn't deem acceptable later on. So I
right.
really think that these people are, cast out from society as much as society frowns upon the things that the government made them do.
Yeah,
And
I understand that, but it's also, we have to look at it as people who are of a younger generation and are beneficiaries of um, the abolition of the draft, for instance. I mean, we don't have to go to war. We don't have to do any of this stuff. We don't have to be military people. We never did. I forget what year it was abolished, but I think it was before, like just before I was even born, or slightly afterwards. Um, so these are people that had no choice. They had to do what they had to do. And if they didn't, we could be in a much worse situation. And we can blame the government, but I think as a society, we're the ones responsible for helping them. We can blame the government for not doing anything, but I look at it as an obligation to help these people, frankly. And that's another reason that I'm coming out and talking about it, is because if there are people out there who hear this, who are in that situation, you guys should know that you're not alone, and you have support, and you're not being left behind. That's really it. Um,
so, what are some of the other stories that we haven't got to talk about? I know you have more experiences and other people you've worked with. We've talked about you worked with Andrew. We've talked about you worked with Barack Obama, who is now Barack Obama. Um, and are there any other significant missions that you can remember, or people you worked with?
did, we talked about the, yeah, we talked about that. We talked about, did we? We didn't talk about the first, what I believe was a secret space program encounter when I was a child, before I first met, I was taken by gray aliens, which was when I was in the mountains in Calgary, near Calgary. Um, I was camping, and I came out of my tent. My my relatives, my mom, dad, my sister, some family friends were all there together, and um, I came out of my tent and I was just looking at the sky at night because I had never seen anything like it. I grew up, to that point I had been in like cities and suburbs, and you don't really get to see the sky very much. And the sky just north of Alberta, or Calgary, in Alberta, excuse me, is pretty immense. It's every way you look, there's horizon and just sky. You can't see it's you sort of can't really comprehend it until you actually go see something like that, I guess. Um, Similar to that would be going out into the desert in Texas or Wyoming or something, and kind of looking in every direction. Maybe you have that where you are. I would assume there probably is. There's plenty of rural area north of Chicago and whatnot. Um, so I was there and I was just checking out the sky, and I don't know if it just sort of appeared or flew in or something, but either way, it was there, and it was this giant craft in the sky. And again, I forgot this. It was the memory was suppressed, which is I think why the gray aliens came to me, was to actually suppress my memory of this at first. But it was literally the size of a city block, and it was just a massive ship just floating there in the sky. And I could see windows, I could see people in it, and they had really, really cool, like Star Trek looking outfits and stuff. It was pretty amazing. And I was just there, a little kid, 5 years old. Look at this! Wow, isn't that cool? But so to me, it was kind of, I had no reference point to how amazing this thing I was looking at was, and um, so to me, it wasn't really that spectacular until I had kind of lived later on, and then realized, and eventually, I guess later recovered my memory of it, and went back to compare it after remembering it, that I had actually seen something pretty unusual and amazing. Um, so I just looked at it for a few minutes, and then a memory I have is that my dad came along looking for me because he was wondering where I had gone to, and he just kind of took me back to my tent while this thing was still there, and sort of ignored the fact that it was there. And then from that point onward, it was never spoken about ever again. So it was almost like, no, that didn't happen.
Did any of the Grays you talked to after that point ever reaffirm that memory for you?
No. In fact, I didn't, as I said, remember it until pretty recently. And I'm going to be 47 in August. That was when I was 4 years old. So,
well, I didn't know if it was pre 2019, and that seemed to be the last occurrence you had with
yeah.
the gray beings. And I didn't know if
Yeah.
your memory recurrence came after 2019 or if it was.
It started to come together sort of, actually, now that I think about it, in about 2017. But it didn't really start, stuff didn't start actually, like I struggled with it quite a bit because I didn't want to accept it, and it was making me sick because of Wernicke's commands that were triggering, that were triggering these symptoms in me because I was remembering. But yeah, it didn't start happening until 2017 at all. Actually, I had been completely memory suppressed until 2017. Now that I remember correctly that. Um, so things have been happening, but things have been happening basically all my life. But I only started remembering them in 2017. This happened in the early 1980s in Calgary when I was 5 years old. That was the very first thing I remember of that's out of the ordinary. Um, other than that, in my early childhood, I just have, like, your typical childhood memories. My first day at school, hanging out with my grandparents, that sort of thing.
So we talked about around when you were 3 years old. We've talked about when you were around 6 year old age. What comes after that? Besides just the regular memories, of course. Do you have any other memories involved in these projects?
I I don't have any that I can recall right off the top of my head. Those are the ones that I've talked about the most. There are other things that I do write down because as I remember them, because I don't want to forget them, because if I don't keep going over them, I will forget them. So I've gone over those memories a few times with other people in other places, so they're sort of easy for me to remember. But those are the only ones I can actually remember without my notes.
Okay.
I do have a notebook, although it's like I'm writing stuff down as I remember it. And
I bet it's constantly bringing in new information, and you hear something else, and that triggers an idea like, oh, I thought that was just a thought, but maybe there's more here. And then the more you don't, I mean, I don't know even how you bring those memories to surface. If it starts out
yeah,
with an idea or something that you thought was a dream, and then you go, wait a minute, I have more detail about this than I thought I did, or how does that
yeah.
how does that refreshing process come to pass?
Well, for me, I'm trying really hard to be a spiritual person and a spiritual minded person. As I said, 20 years ago, I became a Christian minister. So part of that, and keeping my focus on that, which is ultimately my reason for existing, is to bring that to people. Um, a part of keeping focus on that is just meditating, and I found regression therapy to help a lot with my own personal experiences. Meditating on the scriptures is important because it helps keep me focused on what is going on at all times. But as far as my personal experiences, regression therapy has been extremely useful. My wife is also a minister. That's how we met. So it's almost like it's actually better than having a qualified mental health professional around the house, and we sort of keep each other functioning properly that way. And she's been really helpful, actually, that way with me. And she kind of has a really good understanding of a lot of this stuff and the reality of it, simply because of her family's military background also. And she's aware that because I also come from essentially a military family, that there's probably a lot of this stuff in my background as well that would be useful to bring to light. So she's been helpful in doing that.
So you said you left the house at a young age. I believe you said 13. Um, did you ever have a reconnection with your family and your father, who you said is still currently living?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I lost
I just
connection.
didn't know if there was a falling out. Usually, most
No,
parents don't want their 13-year-old to leave, you know?
Yeah, it's a little different with my relatives, like my mom and dad. I guess it's not really like that. It's just sort of I have a pretty big extended family as well, so it's kind of like even if I'm not with, even if I've not been with my parents, I still have family around to fall back on to get help for things, if I need any. So it's kind of like that. It's even though I was away from my parents, I still had relatives around that were like parents and other people who, because of especially because of my uh, the Christian organization that I'm associated with, it's I have a lot of friends and extent like they're like family. So it's not really like being on my own ever, frankly.
Well, the reason I was asking is I was wondering if there was ever a reconnection with your father, and if you guys have ever got to talk about these experiences that you remember his involvement when he was young, when you and him were both younger,
Mhm.
and if you recalled any of it, or if he tries to act like it didn't happen, or
Yeah, I just I never brought it up, and I wouldn't, frankly, because um, I mean, if you're ex-military or you've been involved with military, um, it's kind of once it's over, it's over, and it's kind of like don't talk about it, or because it's in the past. It's sort of an unspoken rule with like military people in general, but for me, it's a little different because of the Christian ministry thing, especially that I do. So, but out of respect to the individual, if I know that they don't want to talk about it, I just wouldn't bring it up. Or if I suspect that they wouldn't want to talk about it, I wouldn't bring it up to them. And I don't believe that my dad is ever going to be ready for that. So I wouldn't count on him as any sort of witness or anything like that. In fact, I would count on the exact opposite, frankly. Um, so that's how that is.
no, I understand where you're coming from. I just wonder if, I mean, I know me personally, I would almost have to do it to justify my own sanity at some point. Like, come on, you were here with me. Just give me a double wink or something if you remember anything of what I'm talking about. We don't have to talk about it. Give me a double
Yeah,
wink and I'll walk away right now and we'll never bring it up again. But that'll be enough to affirm me that hey, I'm not a crazy. You know what I mean? Like that. There's
yeah,
just something like as a family member where I feel like I could get that much out if it was but I mean, I don't know. Of course, I'm just assuming. I'm just thinking of my own family situation and you
mm,
know, reflecting it onto the situation I'm hearing about.
yeah. I can understand that. And then there's also the thing where because of the fact that I am talking about this stuff, there are military and ex-military people who would probably like me to shut up and will thus, you know, attack me and at the very least gaslight me for talking about it, try to make me look crazy and whatnot. And I just don't really want to deal with that sort of thing at all because I don't think it'll be that productive. It's not like I'm afraid to or anything like that, but I just don't think it will be productive if I do that. So I'd rather just put it out there in whatever way I can, and if it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, then. But I think it will. I think it will just sort of become a natural part of the the culture. Basically, is that these are real accounts, and these are not just stories. These are actual events, and it'll be fine for people to talk about them, I think. And that's another reason why I'm doing it. I don't really want to drag anybody else into it either without their consent or will. Um,
Well, and that's some of the reasons I'm asking you the questions I'm asking you is because I think just like you were talking about with this universal consciousness, if there is this one truth and people like Andrew helping you made you remember things about Andrew, whether he's affirmed them or not,
yeah,
it's good to know that information because it brings it all to the forefront and you go, oh, okay, maybe these people were involved. Maybe
yeah.
this part was regressed and they didn't know about it, or and so that was my next question for you is you said when you were talking to Andy that it helped you remember some of the times you were around him. We actually haven't talked about that yet, or it got missing on our part two of our last podcast we did because that one seems to be missing in oblivion. So if you have any stories about times just besides Andrew being in the same area and you guys were working around the same places, just any personal mission experience or times out that you guys had.
Mhm. Well, do you have the part captured about the Mars teleportation incident
I
where I
don't
was?
think we do.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that again if you like. If you'd like to
Yeah,
record it.
yeah. I believe we have a little bit about you working with Barack Obama, but I don't think we actually have you touching on Andrew at all.
India's involvement in that. Again, Obama, Obama. That's another subject. Um, we'll likely never talk about this. And if Andy's approached with it, he will more than likely just deny it. So, but I'll tell my experience, and that is that when I was about, I think, 5 years old, I was living in, this happened around the same time when I was living in Calgary in Alberta, um, right down the street from the first ever joint US Canadian Air Force base, which was made after World War II, which is, I think, notable because uh, most of the secret space stuff was basically compartmentalized as a very, very small section of the Air Force from after World War II up until pretty recently, where Space Force was created by President Trump. It was all basically a subsect of the Air Force, and then like private contractors. But I was living right near that base, and um, somehow there was awareness of some special abilities that I was born with. Basically, I have the ability to remote view and do other things like chronovision. I can actually do these things without the use of technology. They're natural abilities which I carry inside my mind.
I
Um,
was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about the chronovisor as well. With your religious background, if you had any experience with the actual physical object created that was a chronovisor. I say with your religious background because I believe it was created by somebody that worked at the Vatican.
I've never encountered that whatsoever because basically I don't need it. I can do that without technology. Um, and the Catholic Church has nothing to do with me. So
Okay.
anyway, uh,
I just
that,
didn't know if maybe you had maybe done something with the Catholic Church in your past experiences, whether it was the Vatican or not. Maybe that's why you're Christian now. Maybe that's why you feel the way you do now because of past experiences. I feel like if anybody's got prior knowledge on anything religious, I could see how it would make a future decision for them. So if something scared you away in the past, whether it was Catholicism or something like that, I could also see you not being involved with that because you learned more about it.
yeah, I don't. It had nothing. Oh, my internet connection is. Just got a little flash up here. Hold on a second. Okay, so yeah, none of this has anything to do with, as far as I can tell, I suppose it's all interconnected, really, but I have nothing to do with the Catholic Church. Like, let's put that out there.
Okay.
And I haven't for a very, very long time. I mean, my mom, being Irish Catholic, I suppose, but not really, sort of exposed me to that a little bit when I was a child, but I never really became part of that or anything like that. I come from a very different approach and angle when it comes to belief in God. So that to explain would take a very long time. It took me a long time to even reach that point. So it's a whole different subject entirely, and it would take hours to talk about. But
All right, we'll save that for another one.
Mhm.
So,
But yeah, none of this has anything to do
you're
with
in
that.
Calgary at the Joint Base.
Yeah. Well, I was actually in my kindergarten class, which was near the Joint Base, which was near the house we were living in, and the teacher asked me if I wanted to come with her to help with something. Basically, I figured out that these people knew who I what I was able to do, and they wanted my help with something. So they asked me some questions, checked off some lists, paperwork lists on a clipboard, and took me in a vehicle to the base. And from there, I was teleported to California from Calgary. And from California, I was then teleported to the Barack Obama as my working place. I was
And that was
5. He was,
and that was in El Segundo.
yeah, the
Okay.
teleportation base in California is in El Segundo, the one that is to Mars.
999.
And that building is still there to this day. I don't know. I haven't been there since. I don't know if the teleportation thing is still there. It might have been moved by now for security reasons and all manner of other things. Calgary was actually more or less dismantled during the Obama administration, so that's kind of interesting if you think about it. But I don't know about the El Segundo base or El Segundo station. But yeah, they took me up there because they wanted me to remote view the surface of Mars and to figure out what Mars had been like a million years ago. So while I was there outside the elevator in a cavern just under the surface of Mars with Barack Obama as he held a tape recording device, and was speaking into it about what he was able to he somehow had or has himself some sort of telepathic ability. So he was able to actually link up with my mind and figure out what I was seeing. Because my abilities are much stronger than a lot of people's. They're pretty powerful actually, but I'm able to kind of very immediately do these things without much help. And especially so when I was that young. So there I was remote viewing Mars a million years ago as Obama was recording it, and was later transcribed to paper, which is now, by the way, a declassified CIA document on remote viewing on Mars, transcribed in 1984, and it was declassified in about 2000. You can read that online. If you see the wording on it, you can see it's clearly Obama's speech. It's the manner in which he talks. It's obviously him. but he was describing what I was actually seeing, which was that 1 million years ago on Mars there was an advanced civilization that somehow was destroyed in some sort of cataclysmic event. There are remnants of it still there today. There's debris all over the planet. There's still life on Mars. There's a humanoid civilization living in very rudimentary conditions right now. There's other primitive life. And in fact, I got to see some of that when after we were done with the remote viewing session, we went out on the surface and there were some of these creatures there and they were hungry, obviously. While we were out there just kind of puttering about, I guess, some other people came up in the elevator, the teleportation elevator. And one of them was Andy Bishago. It's hard for me to tell what age he was at that point. I don't really know, frankly, because he's sort of one of those characters that are difficult to place how old he really is.
Would you say under a certain age? Like definitely under 13, you know?
No, he was a man, but
you have kids, it's able for you to justify, a kid's age. Like I can look at my daughter,
yeah,
and go, he's definitely not 16 yet, you know?
Well, he was definitely a grown man by that point. He was fully grown, and it's hard for me to tell if he was in his like 20s or his 50s, frankly. I don't think he was any older than 50 by that point, though. So one of them was him, and the other was me. Like two people came up. One of them was me. Like it was an older version of me. I was in fact, I know how old I was 44, because I remember him twice as two different. I have one set of memories from when I was 5, and the other set from when I was 44, and they both are identical in the same place, just as two different people. So the 44-year-old, I'm sorry?
I was gonna say, so what happened when the doors opened on the elevator and you saw yourself and Andrew Basciago? What
Yeah.
occurred?
Well, 5-year-old me didn't even realize that was 44-year-old me, because I hadn't yet lived to be 44. So 5-year-old me didn't realize what I would grow up to look like. I look quite different now to when I did when I was little. So,
do you remember any kind of connection to that person? Like, oh, I recognize them, but I don't recognize them, or any kind of like, maybe this is a family member of mine, or?
No, I had no clue whatsoever who that was.
Okay.
But what happened was that person had a weapon, and they knew that they needed to use that weapon in order to protect everybody, because there were those creatures. I mean, it seemed like Obama knew that they were there. I didn't really know because I'd never been there before. But 44-year-old me used that weapon to kind of take a few of them out that were actually aggressively pursuing, like coming towards us, that probably to eat. So, so then there's that memory as 5-year-old me, and then at that point, Obama said, "Yeah, we got to get him out of here." So they were talking in reference to me, and I had been like, "What am I doing here?" 5-year-old me was like yelling, "What am I doing here?" Because I didn't realize what I'd gotten into. I was only a little kid, and I was just trying to help.
Weren't you astral projecting? Were you physically there, or weren't you astral projecting that time of Mars, that so many million years ago, or did you actually go through the elevator to get to that point as well?
Yeah, this is actual literal physical travel because both times, because I know this for a fact because the sneakers that I was wearing when I was 44 still have Mars dust on them. So, and I still have them. I didn't wash them, but they still have some Mars dust on them. Yep. So,
So what was the second occurrence you said? You were getting ready to go into the second occurrence?
well, there are two different occurrences, both happening at the same time. It's kind of weird. It's an overlap in my mind, but it's all at the same time. So yeah, Obama got me out of there, and we went back down to El Segundo, and then from El Segundo back to Calgary, and then Calgary back into my kindergarten class, where before they took me off the base, they memory suppressed me, and they put me back in my class. And then my mom picked me up at the end of the day from school, not knowing anything about it. So it was as though I had just gone to school, left the class for a minute, and gone back to class, and nothing had ever happened.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was never talked about ever, period.
And did you ever remember the older version of yourself going there?
Yeah, I did. I was 44. It happened a couple of years ago now. That would have been, I guess, 2019. I'm trying to figure out remember what the circumstances were of me actually going there. Where it was, I think it might have been this the same Grays who actually brought me again from where I was to El Segundo.
And is that where you would have met up with Andy and got into the elevator together?
I'm having difficulty remembering the specifics of that, frankly. I haven't tried to really figure it out. But somehow I ended up in the teleporter with Andy Bashago up on the surface with an unarmed Andy Bashago, by the way. And probably him knowing the dangers of being unarmed on the surface of Mars, which I think is another thing. But 44-year-old me knew that I needed to protect 5-year-old me and 19-year-old Barack Obama, and that Andy was along for the ride, or he needed some sort of training or awareness of things, because I would recommend that if we ever do openly plan to colonize and populate Mars in the future, that we do realize that we need to be armed in order to do that, because there's life there and it's very hungry and it will take human life. It's not a peaceful, idyllic sort of place. It's a violent, wild, untamed planet. I think people have this misconception of what that's like. The universe is not always a pleasant place, and we're very fortunate on this planet that we can actually sort of tame it to a certain level, but the universe is not like that. And that's to me now, but it wasn't obvious to 5-year-old me, and it may not have been to 19-year-old Barack Obama or young Andy Bashago. I hope that that's realized now. But
So what did 4-year-old you experience after eliminating the threat? Did you watch Obama take 5-year-old you away, and then you and Andrew continued your mission, or was that your mission being there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was my 44-year-old mission, was to just protect the younger people.
I just didn't know if you left after that, or if you guys continued to do something on Mars, or if you got back in the elevator, and that was
I'll try to remember exactly what happened.
Or do you remember, because you said the Grays got you and brought you at 44, or do you remember how you got back to where they brought you from that
No,
last time?
I don't remember. I do have a note of that though. I did take good notes of that when I was remembering the specifics, so I could go back through that and let you know. But
Okay.
um,
Yeah, no, well, I assume we're going to get a chance to talk again.
yeah.
And it was just great getting to touch on some of these things today.
It is, it is hard to remember a lot of this stuff because, first of all, frankly, I don't really want to. If I'm
Yeah.
completely honest, it's like I just want to have a normal life with my wife and my children and just do fun things.
One at the same time, if it's painful and sickening to your actual body and your physical, you know,
Yeah,
uh, existence, then I can understand another reason you wouldn't want to bring it up.
yeah. I suppose that's a reason. Although I am a redhead, so it's kind of like whatever, redheads and pain kind of don't really. But we're a lot more impervious to pain than a lot of people. I don't know if you realize that, but
No, I
um,
didn't know that.
it's a fact. Yeah, yeah. We can take a lot. It's something to do with our DNA. We can take a lot more pain than most people. So that's not really the biggest issue. But I mean, I have young children. I'm a husband. I just want to have a normal, boring life, basically. But um, stuff happens that you don't plan on.
And like you were saying, you just want to be able to help as many people as well as, make it through your life as possible. That way you're
Yeah, that's definitely
free
true as well.
from it.
It's like it's definitely that. Um, it's definitely the biggest reason is just wanting to help people. Is why I'm talking about it. But other than that, I don't really want to like keep reliving anything or keep going through it. So, as I'm remembering things, I'm writing them down, and then I'm sort of forgetting a lot of stuff right afterwards. But the things that I've continued to go over and recount them to people, such as yourself, is the stuff that's easier for me to remember because it's repetitive. And I've talked about these things a few times already. And I think if you look back, you can see that I'm telling you the same things every time. I'm consistent in what I'm saying. And I think that's further evidence that, this is memory at work here. It's not just fabrication or insanity. I'm telling the exact same specific things each and every time. And, um, you know, people say that people have said that I'm crazy. People have said that I'm all kinds of things, but I think the evidence is contrary to that, frankly. And I just think I think if I do keep talking about stuff, it will over time become very apparent that this is just a small part of a really bigger picture that really, as Americans, especially, I think we're all part of. And we've been trusted with because of the uh, integrity of our country, really. We've been entrusted with some very seriously advanced technology, and we have to be really careful with it and responsible with it. And I think that's the key issue right now at this point is that, that level of responsibility is ultimately what's important moving forward and in how we use it and how we allow it to be used, because it's nice to think that it's great to think the best of everybody. But I think it's naive in that, um, you know, we, yeah, I mean, it's naive to assume that we shouldn't do something to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. That's all I'm saying, because it could be disastrous if we did that. And I think I've noticed that with a bunch of the people who talk about and have talked about this stuff is that there's kind of a naively optimistic view of what we could do with it, and I just don't think it's going to work like that. I don't think that's practical, frankly.
Yeah.
That's the point of view I'm coming from with it, and I think that needs to be considered. I think it's important, and I think it's very important to, especially now that we have presidential candidates who are talking about disclosing all this technology and making it publicly available, which I think is ludicrous, frankly. It's a danger, and we need to be careful, you know.
Well, I mean,
So
I
that's
think
why.
we showed each other in past experiences that usually when we have advanced technology, we tend to use it to harm others. It's never been used for the benefit of humanity as much as we'd like it to be.
Mm,
It's great, yes, if we could stop pollution and use teleportation in that sense, where we weren't firing up a diesel engine and blowing that into the atmosphere. But at the same time, I feel like we're going to use teleportation to end up behind our enemies on the battlefield and
yeah,
kind of utilize there before we think about using it for a global initiative.
yeah, global utopia. Like, and it could be worse. I mean, you don't want to arm your enemies. That's what it comes down to, you know. It's like we could be naive about providing this technology to the world, and it could fall into the hands of people who are enemies of us and are going to use it to harm us. And I mean, I think we've seen that happen in American history. So it's kind of like we've got to be really careful. And so that's another reason why I don't really mind talking about it. And because I've seen already where, you know, for instance, Mr. Bishago has talked about making this stuff public, but he hasn't talked about a solution to the security issues that will inevitably arise because of this. And I don't think he really understands what that entails. And so, as someone who does very clearly understand what that entails, um, I'm I'm also running for president because I want to take care of those things first before anything else. And you have to tie your shoelaces before you run, basically. Um, I just want to tie our shoelaces so we don't fall flat on our face.
Nice.
It's that simple. You get it?
Yes.
Yes. Good.
Well, I want to personally say I can affirm at least since the first time, well, no, the last interview I heard from you publicly, which I believe was on Gary Legier's Mad Martian program. And then when we've talked privately and then also now publicly, I would say that your story hasn't changed at all. You've
Yeah.
been telling me the same story and what you were telling in your last interview that whole time. So I can't say that your story's changed or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I can affirm you on that much. I don't know what other people's experiences with you are, but I know my personal experience with you, and what you've said seems to be consistent, and that's all I have to go off of at the moment. So
Well, I think a lot of people will say horrible things about me anyway, so it's just inevitable, you know. People will disagree about everything, and then there are always people who will, because they don't agree with you, will make it their mission to just tear you to pieces. And I'm I'm not like that, you know. I see everybody's point, and I think it's all very valid, and um, it's all important. It's all part of the big picture. But I think when you look at the big picture, there's a natural order of things, and you have to learn how to walk before you can run, and you have to learn how to tie your shoelaces as well. And that's I think the point that we're at. in the timeline. And people can attack me personally for disagreeing with that. They can attack me personally for a lot of other reasons, and that's all related to other stuff, and they likely will. And I expect that, and I would say if you want to talk to other people about me individually, that'll probably happen. Just understand it for what it is. You know, it's a competitive world. It's people will turn everything into a political issue. I'm just not like that. You know, I think we can all actually, as long as we're sensible, we can all actually run the same team and all be helping each other rather than competing. But that's the angle I'm looking at it from. But unfortunately, that makes me a minority right now. I don't think it will be that way in the future. I hope it isn't. I think we'll reach a point where people won't actually feel even the need to compete with each other anymore, because especially with the advent of things like, it's like we're all going to be rich, like all of us, you know, every last one of us. So we're not going to need to compete with each other over stupid things like money. So that's all going to be taken out of the picture. So I'm looking forward to that, because you know, the way things are right now, I think it's for a lot of people, it's pretty painful. Like we wanted to move forward a lot more quickly. If you have no patience like I do, it's like, can we get this over with already? You know, but here we are still.
Well, I'm gonna do you a favor, and if you're in the mood for it, I'm gonna message you tomorrow with the Zoom call link, and if you would like to, you can jump in and give Andy a call. He's gonna be doing a show.
Oh, cool.
I believe 3 and 5 p.m. Central Time.
Okay.
And I'll give you the link to call in. Like I said, if you just show up with an olive branch, I said that's the least you can do. If it goes the wrong way, just be like, all right, I'm sorry, Andrew, to offend you.
Yeah.
Talk to you
Well,
later.
you know, I don't want to provoke his anger either, because, you know, I don't think that's really going to help anything.
No, not at all. Even if you just go in and thank him for the help that he's given you, I think that would be I think he likes to see, just like yourself, the way he's helped people, and knowing that he can help people in these situations. And I know he's reaching out with a lot of other people, trying to help them with their bringing up these past memories. And I know he's been helping a lot of other people. I just don't know who personally, but he's talked about it and has people reach out to him for that. And it sounds like you have before. And
Yeah, I've definitely tried to be peaceable about everything, you know, and just be part of the solution. And yeah, that's another thing. I actually, if I don't get to do that, I would like to thank Andy for, is actually he introduced me to Bitcoin. I don't know if you realize that, but
oh no, I
when
didn't.
we were talking in 2017, he was running a business with a guy I think in England. It was an online company, and they were introducing people to Bitcoin. And at that point, you know, I was doing okay financially, but I was still kind of struggling a little bit with things, because I had a young child and trying to figure out how to do everything. And then, but I had experience as a stock trader, like a Wall Street trader and a London Stock Exchange trader, and so I understand how markets work and things like that. So Andy explained to me the Bitcoin phenomenon, and I got it in about 20 minutes, which is kind of a record time, because I had all this other prior experience and knowledge of markets. So, but yeah, I wasn't aware of its existence until he told me about it. So once he told me about it, I looked into it, and I've been basically 99% into Bitcoin since 2017. So financially, I'm a lot better off than I was. That's actually thanks to Andy just telling me about it. So I have to thank him for that.
Well, what time is it going to be? What's 3 p.m. Central Time in your time zone?
That's like 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Yeah.
All right. If you have an open time tomorrow at 1 p.m., I'd really be interested in getting you on just to thank him. Even if you guys don't get to talk about anything else, if he hears your name and all he hears after that is, "Hey, I'd like to thank you for these things that you helped me with," and then that's the end of the call. I don't understand how. I do think it'd be beneficial for both of you guys, but I mean, of course, it's always down to your choice. But I do think it would be great, especially if you guys haven't gotten to talk in that many years.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years, so I'd certainly love to do that. So if you want to send me a message when.
But yeah, like I said, I'll share you a link at some point tomorrow, a little bit before it goes down, and then if you're interested, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
But I would like to thank you again for today. I think we got through quite a bit of topics today, and I had a good time, and I've learned a lot from you. And so I would like to do this again. If you have time in the future, maybe we can go over some new things. I know we could talk about religion for a little while. I know we could talk about Bitcoin for probably even longer. And we could make 2 shows just out of that, because I feel like you could teach me more about Bitcoin than I know anything about. So if we want to have a show in the future, I would love to.
Yeah, I'd love to definitely talk about that because I think that's also going to be, and already is, a hugely important thing in this decade. It's transforming the way the world works financially. It's decentralizing everything, deregulating everything. We've already seen at least one country adopting it as their primary currency, which is El Salvador. I think you'll see major countries doing that very soon, and it's just going to transform so many things and give us all so many more opportunities to do things in the future than we would with the current mainstream economic system. So I think that's hugely important. And who knows, it might even enable me to help Andy's campaign financially in 2032.
Those are the new donations.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I come from I come from a Republican background, well, I was just going to say I come from a Republican background, but if there's a Democrat who I can support, I'll support them. I'm not partisan that way, so it has nothing to do with that.
I feel like in the later years, we're going to start to realize a lot of people don't necessarily fall on party lines. They fall where you get voted for. And you can't run as an independent and people see you, because it just won't happen. Doesn't matter if you fall on party lines or not. That's why you see people like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump doing so well. I don't think Bernie Sanders was a Democrat, and I don't think Donald Trump was a Republican. I think they had different views, but they had to fall into those parties in order for people to see who they were, and even to be able to be allowed in a debate.
And Joe Biden thinks I'm a terrorist because I'm a libertarian. So I don't know what to do.
Well, I do think Joe Biden is a classic Democrat and not changing much. I do think he falls into party lines quite well.
Are there libertarian Democrats? I've never met one.
I actually consider myself a conservative libertarian, which nowadays modern term for libertarian is quite confused with classic liberal, which is actually what I am, where I'm more into individuals' rights rather than the state's ability to protect you from yourself.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I grew up not far from the New Hampshire border, so live free or die, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, thank you again. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap it up today?
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for talking. And I hope this information reaches many, many people, and we can continue to spread this information because, it's helpful, I think.
I think so as well. And yeah, I'm going to do my best to keep helping you push this information, and hopefully we can do another podcast again soon. And like I said, I'll share that link with you tomorrow, and maybe we can catch you on another big podcast that's going on, and you'll get a chance to talk to one of these people that you were involved with when you were, at different points in your life. I think it'd be very interesting. But
Yeah,
thanks for today,
okay.
and have a good rest of your day and good weekend as well.
Same to you. Have a good one.
Thank you.